This video was created by VinylicPuma of VinylicPumaGaming.
Hey guys, so a couple of videos ago, I said I was working on a new Fallout 4 survival mode video. The thing is that I'm still in the middle of working on it, so it's going to be just a little bit longer before I put out that specific video. But today, I figured we could take the time to talk about and speculate about Fallout 4 VR and whether it will be a success or not. So let's go ahead here and get into it. But before we do that, I do want to talk about the possibility of Fallout 4 DLC after Nuka World releases sometime in August. Now, originally, I thought there would be more DLC after Nuka World, but given the scope of Bethesda Game Studios trying to get Fallout 4 to run on the HTC Vive headset, I'm not so sure. Now, for me personally, if it was a choice between VR and more DLC, like an Enclave DLC, I would choose the Enclave DLC by far. After all, I'm going to have to spend $450 or so on a new graphics card, and then I have to pay $800 to just get the HTC Vive hardware, which is insane. Now, that's not to say that I'm not intrigued by the possibility of having a new way to play Fallout 4 with a VR headset and the HTC Vive's motion controls, because that could actually, in that it kind of is interesting to me. Hopefully I'm wrong about the fact that there won't be more DLC after Nuka World, but based on some of the points that I'm about to bring up, it doesn't seem like there is going to be any. And now, I did say earlier, given the scope of Fallout 4 VR, and I want to talk about what exactly that I mean about that. And I am going to get somewhat technical here, so feel free to leave a comment if you have questions or if I did get something wrong. So let's go ahead here and we'll just start. So first off, I want to talk about the technical challenges with making a game in VR. Now, most gamers, both on the PC and console, are gaming on a 1080p monitor or TV. Now, both console versions run Fallout 4 at 1080p 30 frames per second. And provided you have the hardware on PC, you are also most likely running the game at 1080p, but at 60 frames per second. If you have a monitor that's capable of higher resolutions, you may be even going beyond 1080p resolution. Now, the important thing to mention here is that most players on all platforms aren't going beyond 1080p, and I guarantee that everyone is not going beyond 60 frames per second for some reasons that I'm going to be getting into later. But back to the VR headsets themselves. Now, the combined resolution of the two eye screens in both the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive is 2160 by 1200 pixels. Now, to give you some idea, at 1080p, you have 2,073,600 pixels, and at the combined resolution on the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive, which again is 2160 by 1200 pixels, you're getting 2,592,000 pixels. Now, this is 518,400 more pixels than 1080p, which exactly actually figures out to 25% more pixels that either your graphics card or your console GPU will need to render. It's also worth mentioning that in order to have a smooth VR experience that doesn't cause motion sickness, you will need to be able to render your games at 90 frames per second. Now, for console owners, this means you would need to be able to render 25% more pixels, and you would need to triple your frame rate. And obviously, on the current Xbox and PlayStation hardware, this is impossible. Even for PC users like myself, this is quite difficult. Now, while I can run Fallout 4 at 1080p 60 frames per second on my PC, I'm doing that on medium to high settings. When I start to max out the game, I do lose some frame rate, and it dips as low as 40 frames per second in some areas. While I'll probably upgrade to a new graphics card sometime this year where I can finally max out Fallout 4 at 1080p 60 frames per second, I may not be able to max out Fallout 4 at 2160 by 1200 at 90 frames per second for some reasons I'm going to get into now. Now, this isn't necessarily confirmed or anything, but it is believed that Bethesda developed Fallout 4 on what is essentially a significantly improved and modified version of the same game engine that was used to develop The Elder Scrolls Oblivion, which, for those of you that don't know, was a game that came out in March of 2006, over 10 years ago. Now, granted, it's not the exact same engine. After all, I don't think Fallout 4 would look quite as good as it does if they didn't improve their technology over the last 10 years. However, it is still somewhat based on that original engine. The fact of the matter is, VR support wasn't even on developers' radar 10 years ago. I mean, even like 4, maybe even 5 years ago, nobody was thinking about developing games for VR. This is really only a recent development. I want to talk about some of the flaws with this same engine that Bethesda has basically been modifying and improving over the last 10 years, as it has some limitations. Now, console users won't notice this, as the console versions of Fallout 4 don't run at frame rates beyond 30 frames, let alone 60 frames per second. However, on the PC, you can go beyond 60 frames per second with some consequences. Now, I'm not a programmer, so I'm going to probably explain some of this poorly, but certain aspects of the game logic for Fallout 4 are locked to the frame rate. So, for example, you'll notice when you try to pick locks above 60 frames per second that it's almost impossible to control it because your actions are so fast. And that also actually goes the same with like the main menu, as if you barely press down on your controller or keyboard, you'll go straight down to the bottom when you intended to just go down like one little part on the individual menu. You also get increased movement speed, which is really bizarre to experience. And on the one hand, it feels kind of good. And I also think there's some certain animations that go much faster due to the higher frame rate. But my whole point here is that Fallout 4 becomes unstable once you go beyond 60 frames per second. All right, so here's where we're at. The demands of running Fallout 4 and having a smooth VR experience are higher than just running Fallout 4 at 1080p 60 frames per second at max settings. You would need to run Fallout 4 at 2160 by 1200, which is 25% more pixels at 90 frames per second. Now, on consoles, this is going to be impossible, and on PC, you'll need a computer that's fairly high-end to even have a chance at running the game. There's also the issue with Bethesda Game Studios' current engine, because Fallout 4 has problems running beyond 60 frames per second because of the way the engine works. Fallout 4 would need to run flawlessly at 90 frames per second, as well as run at a higher resolution for a smooth VR experience. From my point of view, Bethesda is going to have to create an entirely new game engine and then port Fallout 4 over to the new engine. While Bethesda could probably get Fallout 4 to run the required resolution that the Oculus Rift and HTC Vive need, Bethesda's current engine can't go beyond 60 frames per second and be stable. Remember, you need 90 frames per second, otherwise you get motion sickness while using VR. It also seems unlikely to me that the modified Oblivion engine is going to have motion control support, which is something that the HTC Vive has, and you need motion control support in order to use those controllers. Bethesda is also going to have to add motion control support to their game engine as well. Now, of course, Bethesda could forgo and totally ignore motion control support entirely and just use the headset to control the camera. While I'm not a game developer or the head of a game company like Bethesda Game Studios, it seems like this would take a lot of time and money to accomplish. It doesn't seem like you could make this a free update to existing Fallout 4 owners. After all, you would need to create an entirely new game engine just to get this to work. My other question is if this is really going to be worth it for Bethesda to do properly. Not everyone that plays Fallout 4 plays the PC version, and not everyone that plays on PC even plays at 1080p, let alone resolutions beyond 1080p. Now, this is speculation on my part, but I'm thinking that the Xbox Scorpio that's supposed to release next year will end up having Fallout 4 VR as one of its launch titles. After all, the Xbox Scorpio is going to be using Oculus Rift as its VR device. But at the same time, what's crazy about that is that Oculus Rift is competing with the HTC Vive for being like the dominant VR headset. Having Fallout 4 VR as a launch title actually makes sense if you could have it on PC and Xbox, because that would justify the cost of creating that game engine. And then maybe later on down the road, the PS4 Neo and PlayStation VR would later get a version of Fallout 4 VR. This also brings up another interesting question of whether the Xbox Scorpio and PS4 Neo will have motion controls, which in my personal opinion are really a trend, fad, or gimmick that got played out with both the Nintendo Wii and Nintendo Wii U. We're also forgetting about one of the most important problems with VR in general right now, and that is the price of both units. The Oculus Rift currently costs $600 in the US, while the HTC Vive is $800 in the US. Not everyone has the money to spend on either of these devices, let alone both. Even if you're a PC gamer, you can buy a really sick graphics card from Nvidia or AMD for about $350 to $450, and in my mind, that's a better investment as that's going to be compatible with more games. But anyway guys, I think that's going to pretty much wrap up this particular video. If you like this video, please be sure to leave a like, and as always, take care and I'll see y'all next time.